And that's the principal position India holds. But I don't see that this reunification is happening anytime in future. And this reunification simply cannot happen when there is a major power involvement is there in the Korean Peninsula. We have seen United States of America is critical because India is a critical actor in the Asian geopolitics and in the larger Indo-Pacific politics. India's strategic canvas is expanding. India is a critical partner, a strategic partner to Republic of Korea.
북한과 유사한 경로로 거의 30년도 전에 핵무장을 완료한 비공식적 핵 보유국 인도는 북한 핵 문제를 어떻게 보고 있을까요? 오늘은 인도의 시각에서 본 북중러 협력과 한반도 인도태평양 지역질서를 살펴보겠습니다. 스톡홀름의 Institute of Security and Development Policy, 즉 안보발전정책연구원의 자가나스 판다 연구위원은 흥미롭게도 인도-파키스탄 관계를 남북한 관계와 유사한 분담의 경험으로 바라봅니다. 두 지역 모두 역사 갈등과 강대국의 개입 속에서 통일이 복잡한 과제가 되었기 때문입니다. 현재 북한은 중국, 러시아와 전략적 연계를 강화하고 있으며 이 권위주의 체제 간 삼각 군사 협력은 파키스탄 그리고 이란과도 긴밀히 연결되어 있습니다. 과거부터 북한과 파키스탄은 과학기술과 핵개발 분야에서 긴밀히 협력해왔고 이는 인도에게 직간접적인 안보 위협으로 인식되어 왔습니다. 판다 박사는 이러한 북중러-파키스탄 핵 네트워크가 아시아와 인도태평양 지역의 안정을 동시에 흔들 수 있는 중요한 요소라고 주장합니다.
Okay, today we invited world-renowned scholar and policy analyst Dr. Jagannath Panda of Institute of Security and Developmental Policy. The floor is all yours.
Professor Paik, good morning from Stockholm, and glad to be here in your podcast. And I also thank your excellent team, Ms. Soy, and others for arranging this. Great pleasure to talk to you. Let me share with you my brief ideas. And, this is a topic that is not really very often discussed in the Asian or in the Indo-Pacific context. But I'm sure, lot from South Korea, from Korean Peninsula, from East Asia, and from the wider Indo-Pacific region, they want to know how does really India look at North Korea and how does really India look at the Korean Peninsula per se. And I think in my talk, I'm going to share some of my views and perspective on these issues. I think one of the fundamental issue that comes to many analysts and scholars' mind to understand that how does really India look at DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I think in order to understand the dynamics between India and DPRK, we need to go back to a little bit history. I think India was one of the first non-communist countries to recognize the DPRK in 1973. And what we should also keep it in mind, that's the period when India was actually fighting a lot of war with Pakistan and also, just overcome from the difficulty of facing a war with China in 1962. And that is the period in early 70s when there was a lot of geopolitical shifts was undergoing. But India was the first non-communist country to recognize the DPRK, its establishment, and also, despite of all of these geopolitical complexities that India was facing from Pakistan and China during those years, India decided to maintain diplomatic ties rooted in non-alignment principle, which has been the backbone of Indian foreign policy, and respect for sovereignty. Since then, if you see, India has certainly maintained a cordial relations with North Korea. And today, there is an Indian embassy continues to operate in Pyongyang, in North Korea. And that itself explains that how India perceives North Korea, do not want to really cut down the diplomatic ties with North Korea despite of all the sanctions North Korea faces due to its nuclear test and nuclear technologies. India still maintains a cordial and a dialogue-prone cordial behavior towards North Korea. Now here the question comes, what about the bilateral engagement between India and DPRK? Well, if we talk about the bilateral engagement between India and North Korea, I think the bilateral ties have focused mainly on humanitarian assistance rather than strategic alignments. So providing humanitarian assistance to North Korea has been one of the backbone of India's engagement with the DPRK. India has in fact provided food and medical aid, through different UN programs, particularly through the UN World Food Program. Of course, the trade contacts between India and North Korea has been quite minimal, and that's the case with most of the countries in the world, except probably China and North Korea, as you correctly understand. But I think India has not really, seen North Korea so adversely, except on a few issues. Even though the trade has been minimal and halted entirely after the UN sanctions post 2017, but still India maintained limited engagement, keeping the regional communication and dialogue options open with North Korea. Now here, the follow-up question comes, how does really India see, or India does take a position on the DPRK, particularly on so much complex issues such as the nuclear and ballistic missile programs? Well, I think India maintains a very careful positions on North Korea, and also most of these positions drawn on the basis of non-alignment principle. That means we do not really want to condemn North Korea to the extent where the relationship with North Korea or the partner or the future perspective to build a good cordial partnership in the Korean Peninsula will be lost forever. So therefore, if you see India's diplomatic stance on DPRK, India has consistently voices concern over North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. And that's also especially due to proliferation risk impacting South Korea. While condemning violations of UN resolutions, India avoids confrontational rhetoric. And that's what you could see in India's policy stand or India's position in the UN resolutions. India does not really express a strong condemnation or doesn't really express its views or stance in such a way which will confront with the DPRK. It supports sanctions. India actually supports sanctions targeting weapons development while safeguarding humanitarian channels. That means India wants to maintain a humanitarian channel of communications with the DPRK, but at the same time, it sanctions weapons. It sanctions and supports UN resolutions, which targets weapon development and proliferation issues, particularly promoting the nuclear weapons. And in fact, if you go into the details, India's concern has been about how North Korea is deeply engaged in the South Asian strategic periphery. As you know, the entire nuclear issues is linked with North Korea's nuclear issues are linked with the Chinese assistance and also backdoor support of Pakistan. As we know, Pakistan through its very well-known scientist, A.Q. Khan, has supported North Korea in terms of providing knowledge and nuclear technological technological knowledge, sharing, technological data, nuclear data, how to go for, nuclear test. Those has been concerned. So the North Korea, China, and Pakistan link on the nuclear resource has been a concern for India, and India does voices its concern over North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile program, especially due to proliferation risk impacting the South Asian security environment. Now, here the critical question comes. What is India's position on denuclearization of DPRK? This is a complex issue. As you know, many actually draw a difference between denuclearization of DPRK and denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. From India's point of view, both are very closely linked. But at the same time, India supports complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. At the same time, if you see, India advocates diplomatic engagement over coercion and emphasizes negotiation between DPRK, the US, and many other regional actors. In fact, proliferation risks are viewed as threats to global and regional security as far as India is concerned. So therefore, India's position on denuclearization of DPRK is very, very careful, cautious, but at the same time, India supports a complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. Now, what is India's stance on denuclearization of Korean Peninsula? India actually views India's stance and India's view actually extends peninsula-wide, promoting a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula through mutual security guarantees and phased disarmament. And I think that's the position India takes. India continuously asks that the Korean Peninsula should be nuclear-free through mutual security guarantee, and it should be also going for a disarmament process through a phased manner. And that actually aligns with India's broader global nuclear disarmament principles and Indo-Pacific stability goals. In fact, people might ask that India itself is a nuclear power. And how come India can advocate for a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula? Actually, the way India is actually asking for a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula, that is very closely linked with India's broader global nuclear disarmament principles and bringing peace and stability to the region. India continuously asks that the global nuclear environment should go for disarmament by phase, and it should have followed disarmament principles. And that's how India would actually like to maintain its position as far as the denuclearization of DPRK and denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula are concerned. Now, here one last point before I stop and invite you to pose your comments and questions. One of the critical aspects here is how should we see India's stance on Korean reunification? Because reunification is not a dead subject; it's still very much alive. Many scholars, thinkers, and professors they do ask about Korean reunification, whether there is a prospects of South Korea, North Korea reunification. Well, India actually understands that the reunification process is a very complex process. It's very similar like India-Pakistan reunification process, which is very closely linked with history. And today, to talk about India-Pakistan reunification to a single nation is very complicated a matter. And I don't think strategically and in real practice, it is possible today, given the kind of foreign policy, given the kind of country Pakistan is emerging as. So therefore, I think the Korean reunification process and the topic is very complex for India, but at the same time, officially and formally, India supports a peace sphere a peaceful Korean-led reunification process without external interference. And I think that's the stance India would like to maintain, that India would like that both the Koreas should take the lead in terms of talking about the reunification process without any external major powers interference. And also India stresses and emphasizes that self-determination and encourages for a inter-Korean dialogue between the two Koreas. As you could see from the Panjuman Declaration to many other declarations, India has been quite supportive to such declarations, and India talks about inter-Korea dialogue. But at the same time, India refrains from endorsing any specific model, but supports confidence building measures. As you know, confidence building measures has been the backbone of peace and stability between India and China. And if we go back to also history, confidence building exercise was also another important aspect of India-Pakistan dialogue process. So therefore, India has always emphasized on confidence building mechanisms, and therefore India would not really talk about any specific model of specific model to be implemented about Korean reunification. Rather, India would support a Korean-led reunification process if it has to happen at any point of history. But at the same time, at this moment, given the complexity of the Korean Peninsula, India would like to see that both North Korea and South Korea continue to exist as it is and maintain a cordial approach towards each other. Now, here actually, a point comes. How does really India maintains its careful strategic balancing between South Korea and North Korea? I think this is a very complex topic, but as far as foreign policy directives is concerned, India might be maintaining a equicordial relation with South Korea and North Korea. But at the same time, when it comes to politics, when it comes to the Korean Peninsula major power politics, India maintains a equidistant relations from South Korea and North Korea and do not want to be a part of the politics in the Korean Peninsula. But at the same time, India today sees South Korea, the Republic of Korea, as one of the critical economic and defense partner. In fact, India's ties with South Korea is progressing day by day on many issues, be it technology, trade, economics, defense sphere. India maintains a healthy and strong strategic partnership with South Korea. But at the same time, India maintains a minimal yet principled ties with the DPRK. That means we do not want to really talk too much about strategic partnership with the DPRK, but we want to talk more about strategic partnership with the ROK, that is the Republic of Korea. So Republic of Korea is a preferred partner for India when it comes to trade, economics, defense, and security and strategic issues. And in between this, strategic balancing, India's goal is to promote stability, actually without isolating North Korea completely, avoiding deeper DPRK dependence on China, because China is a critical actor in the Korean Peninsula, and India do not want that North Korea should be very close to China, as well as to Pakistan and Russia, including Russia. So therefore, India maintains a cordial relations with North Korea and do not want to isolate North Korea completely and wants to promote stability in the region. Now, here, the big picture. What is India's approach when it comes to act as a responsible regional or global actor? Of course, Korean Peninsula matters to India. India has a active Act East policy. So under the Act East policy, we see both South Korea and North Korea are two important partners and two important countries in the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, India aligns DPRK policy with global non-proliferation commitments through humanitarian aid, dialogue advocacy, and adherence to UN mandates. India positions itself as a balanced and responsible stakeholder in Asian security. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, South Korea is a critical country to India, and the partnership with South Korea is being given a huge preference in Indian foreign policy. So therefore, when it comes to the partnership with South Korea, India sees South Korea as a critical bilateral partner, as well as a partner in Asia and in the larger Indo-Pacific. As you know, if you see India-South Korea joint statements today, it's not only bilateral centric. It actually talks about so many critical issues, particularly in the Asian context as well as in the wider Indo-Pacific context. There has been few discussion about how India and South Korea should improve the ties in the multilateral forums. So the South Korea ties is critical to India. India sees South Korea as a critical partner in global forums, in many global multilateral forums. So the relationship is improving continuously, and particularly in the area of science and technology, defense, including in semiconductor. South Korea is emerging as a critical partner for India, and India want to capitalize on that. So if I could summarize my perspective, I would say that North Korea's relationship with India is limited, and it is limited and quite marginal in the context of India's non-aligned principle. India still says that India can implement a principle of strategic autonomy. That means we could still continue to engage with North Korea, but that does not mean the relationship with South Korea is not given preference. In fact, the relationship with South Korea is one of the priorities in recent years in Indian foreign policy, and that's how India positions itself. Looking forward to a very engaging, sustainable, and secure partnership with South Korea, because it's a critical economic actor in the Korean Peninsula. I will stop here and probably invite your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your, comprehensive overview and then evaluation on India's perspectives and approach to the two Koreas, not just in North Korea, but also in South Korea. Yeah, I mean, again, India-South Korea relationship and Republic of Korea relations has been improving steadily and not very, quickly. I think this is a pretty important part. But at the same time, India's approach to North Korea it's not, doesn't revolve around the strategic alliance or alignment, but it revolves around humanitarian aid. And then he, Dr. Panda compared the India-Pakistan relationship and then South Korea-North Korea relationship. Yeah, I mean, let's start with this. I mean, plenty of questions to ask to you. The Great Divide, yeah, of course, the Pakistan and India and Pakistan, and the South Korea and North Korea. You just briefly mentioned about you don't think in the South, the India and Pakistan won't have any chance, to reunify in the subcontinent, South Asia. I agree with you. I think this is a pretty long shot. I think it's not impossible shot, but it's pretty long shot. But what do you take on the South Korea and North Korea's reunification potentials? I think that's a pretty interesting question to make.
Well, this is a very complex topic, as you know, Professor Peck, and reunification is it's a long-drawn, systematic process that has to be decided between the two Koreas, and that's the principal position India holds. But I don't see that this reunification is happening anytime in future, and this reunification simply cannot happen when there is a major power involvement is there in the Korean Peninsula. We have seen United States of America is a critical actor there. China is a critical actor. In fact, there are also other major actors, including Russia, is involved in the process. So, any kind of unification or reunification we are talking about, as you know, there is a difference between unification and reunification. Probably the process of reunification implies to the undivided Korea. But when we're talking about unification, we are primarily talking about unification under the current context. So how this process actually leads to discussion, dialogues between the two Koreas, and how the world is reacting, particularly the major powers, particularly the United States of America, China, Russia, including, in fact, a country like Japan. How is it really responding? Will invariably matter to India, because even though, as I mentioned in my talk, that India do not want to involve itself too much into the Korean Peninsula politics or major power politics in the Korean Peninsula region, but still, India would not really be blind to all of this politics, because India is a critical actor in the Asian geopolitics and in the larger Indo-Pacific politics. India's strategic canvas is expanding. India is a critical partner, a strategic partner to Republic of Korea, South Korea. So I think keeping all of the interest in perspective, India would not really, be blind eye to the reunification process of the major power politics. But at the same time, India do not really see this reunification process happening anytime soon. And primarily it is not happening because probably not the major powers, particularly US and China, they do not want the two Koreas to be united. Because if given a circumstances, both South Korea and North Korea are united, then there will be stronger Korea emerging out of it. And a stronger Korea is not really a good thing to China. A stronger Korea is not good thing to United States of America. So I think a stronger united Korea is not in the interest of major powers like China, Russia, and the United States. And this is where I don't really anticipate and see that the two Koreas are going to be united. And therefore, India would also looking at the developments carefully, but I don't see in any time in future India would anticipate that the two Koreas are going for unification.
Okay, thank you so much.
판다 박사는 인도가 한반도의 평화와 완전한 비핵화를 지지하며 외부 간섭 없이 남한과 북한이 민족 자결권에 의해 통일 과정을 조성해야 한다고 강조합니다. 인도의 공식적인 입장이죠. 어찌 보면 인도의 한반도 등거리 외교라고도 할 수 있겠습니다. 파키스탄과 인도의 통일만큼이나 북한과 한국의 통일도 어려울 것이라고 평가하는 판다 박사. 결국 인도에게 북한은 협력의 대상이라기보다 균형과 경계의 변수입니다. 강화되어가는 북러중 삼각 군사 협력 구조는 인도에게도 큰 위협이라고 말합니다. 판다 박사의 논의에는 한국에게도 인도태평양과 동북아시아 지역의 안정을 균형 있게 관리해야 할 어려운 외교적 과제를 상기시킵니다.